Hey there, and welcome to Series 3 of the Figuring Things Out podcast. I'm your host, Will Brown. Our third series explores the topic of creativity. What exactly is it? How does one curate it, make time for it, or even sustain it? Can you teach creativity? Are we born creative? How to get out of your own way? And much, much more. We hear from our own guests' experiences, their life stories, and their advice and ideas on creativity. There is a ton of gold in this series. We must say a huge thank you to our patroons who continually support us in this project. They help us with creative input, such as topic suggestions, questions to ask, and even guest requests. If you'd like to become a patroon and get involved with the podcast, please visit Figuring Things Out Podcast via Patreon. In doing so, you'll allow us to keep making these conversations and support us in keeping it ad-free. In episode 3, we had a great conversation with David Johnston of Accept and Proceed. He came into the conversation with a list of randomly selected words, and we tried to creatively add them into the conversation. We both really enjoyed this, and I decided to take it forward and put it into episode 4 and episode 5. We'd love to keep this going as it's a really lovely addition of chaos, volatility, but also intrigue. It keeps me on my toes, and therefore the conversation has a little bit extra. Please let us know in the comments if you like or dislike this, and if you have any more ideas. Thanks for listening, and now, on to today's guest. Enjoy the conversation. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Figuring Things Out podcast. I'm excited to say that I have Tom Weskler and Roser Tutusaus with me today. They are both artists, teachers, and performers that are currently based in Barcelona, Spain. They founded the performing arts company Wonderground in 2018 with the aim of creating kinetic poems and meditative spectacles. Shortly after, in 2022, they opened their own space, The Island, to create art and teach their own ideas. Their teachings come under the name Movement Archery, which tours the world, sharing workshops and intensives. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
Thank you.
It is. We had a really nice opportunity recently. So in London, back in November, we had you over and we hosted you via London Movement Group for our 5-year anniversary. We hosted you for not only a performance of Rise, but we also had this kind of interview and conversation thereafter in the moment. And it was really nice. The conversation formed more or less around the topic of Rise and the performance itself. Today, what I would really love to do is not only talk about the creations that you're producing, but also the creativity regarding movement archery, the teachings, the pedagogy, and your own personal practices throughout. In essence, we're looking at creativity as a concept as we step backwards. However, before we dive in, as I was saying before, I have a little addition to add to the chaos of creativity, which is the random word addition to the conversation. So I have took the liberty to generate 3 random words before we came on air, and I have them written down in front of me. And each of them corresponds to a number. So I have number 1, number 2, and number 3. When I feel like I want to, I'm going to suggest we introduce the random word. You guys will say to me 1, 2, or 3, and basically that will be the word. And we'll try to intertwine it into the conversation, either in a question that I ask or in a response that you give, or both. Okay. Having said that, let's start somewhere because there's a lot of rambling from me. So the work that you guys are doing is somewhat broad. You have this formative aspect, you're running a space, you're working with many different people in many different ways, you're teaching, you're trying to create ideas from the ground up and share them in different ways. How do you manage this? And how do you sustain a certain level of interest or creativity even in these broad scopes?
I think for me it's actually very natural. Our whole society, the whole premise of becoming a functional member of society is based on defining yourself, framing what you do well, and how you go about in your days, allowing yourself to do it well. And also framing your identity. And all of these frames and all of this training for specificity, basically, and training for having a solid identity, for me, is things that limit creativity. So actually, the broadness in our objectives and also in the universes that we operate is almost something that is pushing us to keep being creative. The fact that as artists we are being challenged and asked certain questions that sometimes, of course, we can learn from them and then use them in a pedagogical space or in a personal space or in a business space. But at the end of the day, we're being asked to behave in very different ways, to generate very different type of ideas, and to basically shuffle our own identity. So being committed to a broad spectrum of professional universes is something that we feel is very naturally generating from us more creativity than we would have to use if we would be committed to a single thing.
You mentioned the word identity, and something that always sticks in my mind and something I really love to ask is, how do you choose what to do? Because I think a lot of people listening to this will be into or at least aware of the idea of movement. And as I said in the first question, there's such a broad scope of not only work that you do, but I think potential within the sphere as a whole. How do you think you guys work with making choices? Do you have a way of relating to it based upon personal interest or how you relate to yourself that use the word identity?
I think for me, like what it resonates with what you just said, like the word that came into my mind was a lot of listening. Somehow, like that's like the place where I kind of make choices. Like it starts with like listening to myself, and how do you do that? Of course, there is a certain like cleanup or of noises, and that it's connected to something that I wanted to say before, but it's like practice. For me, creativity departs from a practice, which it can contain creative aspects, but not necessarily. It also contains a lot of repetition. But it's like a very concrete place where to depart from. And in my practice, I'll try to create a space of listening.
Mm.
So if to collaborate with this, we have a certain I think in all of our professional activities, also in our personal life, we have a little bit of a cloud of inspiration from the Buddhist world, in particularly from Zen. And one of the interesting things in the propositions, if I really extract and I make it very accessible, is from Zen Buddhism, is the fact that rather than that you have a center as a person, is that you have a central practice, and your practice is something that can move into different containers, into different situations. And, you operate from there, not from who am I, but what am I practicing? And for example, in that sense, listening as a very, very core practice of people who choose creativity as something that is in their daily lives, it is a practice that helps us make choices. So whichever universe we step into, the first thing that we do is we practice listening. And from there, the choices become a little bit more simple in a way, or a little bit more connected, we like to say.
Something that Roser said before was the word noise. And something I find interesting is when you try to listen, something you have to decipher is what's really there to be listened to and what's noise that you have to try and cut away, let's say. Do you guys have a certain process or a way of working to understand this or to decipher this?
First of all, plenty. I mean, we have a lot of filters, again, you can also say, but I think that, for example, as artists, it's a very funny place to learn how to decipher noise and I mean, relevant feedback, that relevant feedback, both on a human level, but also, relevant feedback from the situation, from the circumstances, from the world. When you present a piece of art, everybody has an opinion, and this opinion can be based on 2052 things that has nothing to do with you, and you cannot survive if you are always open to everything that will come up. And you have to learn how to create your own filters as a survival mechanism, which is a very human thing. Also as humans, we cannot accumulate all the sensory information that we get at any given moment. So we have to specify, which goes again to the beginning. The specification, when it's on autopilot, it's framing yourself. But when you choose your specification and you keep on questioning it, you keep on saying, okay, what's the filter that's important for me? What am I looking for when I'm receiving feedback from my situation? What am I looking for when I succeed and fail? Then it becomes, once again, more of a practice rather than it's something that happens despite of you.
I'm going to say something funky, but
Please.
it's connected.
We're here for that.
Cleaning, embodying like the action of cleaning. Like, for example, now that it can be in the house, of course, but like, when you start an activity and you are in the space, what do you take out of the space? Like, at least for me, it influences a lot, like how the space is being laid out and the things that are there. So sometimes like just starting by cleaning the space, like organizing, taking out stuff, it kind of like embodies the action of like taking out noise. If you are like, aware of it and like you do it with this in mind.
This is a perfect opportunity to ask a question that I wanted to ask, but I didn't know how to ask it. So recently you guys shared a couple of online courses. And one of them was a warm-up, like a course relating to your warm-up. And it's something that you've been working with for a number of years. And my first thought was, interesting. They're selling a warm-up. I wonder. And then I was like, there's something there. There's something there. And from my personal experience, both in your workshops, working online and now being, working with you guys in certain ways, there's a certain amount of bravery to take not only what's simple, but what's true and share it with the world that you guys have, that I really appreciate. And that there's no, something I said to you guys after the workshop in London was you were able to share very simply things that were very deep or very complicated. And I really respect this. So I may be conflating two things here, but I'd love to hear a bit more about the idea of the online course and the warm-up, because I feel like there's some depth there that on the surface is not shown.
Well, I think that, already the online reality for us is a noise that we had to learn how to take it, how to filter it in a way that will allow us to interact with it and then stay stay connected to our practice in that sense. Again, I don't want, by the way, this world will receive a certain aura, it's like practice or connection. But, just because you asked, like as soon as the whole emergence of internet have been such a so ballistic and so quick, then, all of a sudden you get all this information and all of this pushes and pulls. And you're like, okay, people want to learn from you online, and people in the arts world want you to kind of extract different multimedia creations, and this is how you sell stuff. And it's also quick. And you're like, hold on a second. I was like, I was going towards something else, and now I have to collaborate with this. And this is where comes, for example, the filter. And for example, with the online course, it was a big it was a lot of suffering from the both of us to understand how can we actually collaborate with this wave without feeling that we're just like, okay, we're writing something that has nothing to do with what we do, and we're still suffering, but for example, there was a little bit of a polarity work there, tension that we felt that despite everything, because all of the virtual world is basically based on two things being quick and things being sensually or visually, even not sensually, visually extravagant, and both of these things is not things that we're very good at. First of all, we work slow, our movement sessions are slow. We cook slow, we get into things slow. Second of all, the aesthetics that is interesting for us and that we feel represent us has something that is a little bit more humble than what would make sense nowadays in the universe of the internet. So we're like, if we take things that we really, really have confidence in, like if you throw us now and you say, teach one thing, where do you start from? Usually we start from meditation. What's the next thing you do? The next thing is we do a warm-up, And so this was a very, very intuitive thing. And for example, our workshops, we change a lot. The tools for improvisation, for example, we change them all the time. Our partnering also is influenced by different shifts, by different eras, sometimes more martial arts, sometimes more contact. And also technically, we rotate things. But the warm-up has been a certain essence for us that this type of something that is a little bit inspired by, the how meditation becomes movement in the most essential form, and that you have the discipline to do it daily, to clean yourself, to listen, and all of the things that we said. So like, okay, if we manage to put this in the online universe, even if we have to work quick and a little bit find a way to change the aesthetics for what this universe demands and how it runs, we will still keep a certain loyalty to what's authentically meaningful in our opinion. So this course was a very, very interesting experiment in this. It's too soon to know how it went and if we succeeded, but we feel that we did our best.
I think the warm-up, it's almost the creation of a space, that it starts from within the body and it resonates and it projects literally in the space that you are occupying. And for me, it's like almost the most meaningful part, in the sense of creating the space of concentration and focus to actually keep going with my practice or with the creativity or with the rehearsal or whatever. But the warm-up for me is the creation of space. Then there is techniques that you can acquire. There is repetitions that you need to do, whatever. But I think warm-up, this is the special thing of warm-up, that I don't really find it in other aspects of the practice. It's like it's your body in the space.
And by the way, on the connection to creativity, there is a term that is used outside of movement circles that is the term of priming. that this is, creating the space for the practice by warming up is basically priming, is finding the right side of yourself that fit the thing that you're going to do.
Do you ever find when you go to a different space, like you guys are lucky with the island, you have this beautiful home, let's say, for the creativity. But when you go to other spaces and there's other pressures or influences, people, time, music, whatever it may be, do you ever struggle to find that space within your warm-up?
Not really, because like the space that I'm talking about is like an internal space that grows into the external. So like the warm-up starts from the internal. So I feel like if you are doing it in like other places, it's more challenging, but I think it can be also a very good practice, no? Like to be in a, not when all the surroundings are like actually like working nicely for you, but the warm-up is an internal space and then it goes out.
Let's do this. I want to frame creativity. The question I'd like to ask is, what is creativity to you both? But I would love to add the first random word. And let's see how it works, okay? So please, 1, 2, or 3.
2.
That also reminds me.
Very good. The word is absorption.
Absorption.
What is creativity to you?
I mean, you will get 2 different definitions because as much as we're working daily together, we still didn't manage to hit
This is
telekinetic connection. So
Perfect. We have 4 other definitions in the other podcast.
I must say that this is like the question that I was fearing the most. That you
Really?
would
But you
ask
knew the topic,
directly,
wasn't it?
what is creativity? Like,
Definitions, no.
and you did it.
This is for me, really, like all of the seasons and the podcasts and the conversations I've been doing, I've tried to pick topics that I couldn't really define. And in a way chosen the impossible conversations in order to have these kind of roving conversations around something you can't quite grasp. And so movement was the first one. And again, it's going around in circles, and injury and recovery again is something that's a little bit hard to really grasp and to truly understand. And I feel like creativity is another one. So there's no pressure to have an absolute, especially when the word is absorption.
Yes.
Whatever resonates.
You have it?
I mean, I think, for me, the absorption of the permission to create.
Go more. What do you mean?
At the end of the day, there was a few years ago that we were talking not about what is creativity, because it's true that we're a little bit afraid of defining it, but what is a creative person, And I think even though I'm not sure if it's ours or we took it, there's a wonderful book that is called Creative Quest by Questlove. He's a musician from the band The Roots. He's the drummer. And he did a lot of research about creativity with stand-up comedians, with chefs, with a lot of different professionals. And he said, I'm not even sure if it's his or ours after reading the book. Somebody said it, that as simple as a creative person is a person that creates. Okay. Now, redundant, but I think that it has a certain truth within it. And basically the only thing that you need to create is to give yourself permission, which again, usually we don't get because of many good reasons, there's
the absorption of the world.
The absorption of the world, Yeah, so basically just to be able to absorb the permission instead of absorbing the daily necessities of the world, or the constant necessity or the evolutionary necessities, whatever it is, then it's already a creativity to absorb this permission.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are very, because we are artists, but also like everything that it's connected to movement. There is something about something that it was absent or didn't exist, and then making it happen, make it existent, making it physical. So I think like our process of creativity contains this, from non-existing to existing. And then in the middle, we have, I think that there is strategies and there is processes and there is phases where creativity manifests in different ways. Like for me, a word that is connected to creativity is like associations, like to see a connection in between things that maybe it wasn't there or is not that obvious, or like reframing that connection. For me, association is also something connected to creativity, and that's why, for example, I found very inspiring when I cross people from different fields, or I work with different disciplines, because it allows me first of all to like release the grip of the frames that I have, and then dive freely and get absorbed by the new definitions and new perspectives.
So the dialogue between the absorption of permission to the absorption of associations.
We are hardcore. We are like, you say absorption, and we are like, yeah.
Improv, perfect. Sorry to interrupt, just a quick note. This podcast is a self-funded project and we're trying our best to keep it ad-free. If you're enjoying the conversations and would like to support us, please feel free to do so for the price of a coffee via Patreon. You can also share it with your friends, as it really helps us to grow. For any coaching, courses and event offers, please visit our website www.figuringthingsout.com. For now, back to the podcast. Tom, you mentioned permission to share. It is something creative, and something that comes to mind is confidence, or the willingness to be vulnerable. Do you guys have any feelings of the topic of or let's say what you do when you worry about sharing something, or how do you work with this? Because especially relating to the previous topic of social media, there's a whole load of new troubles we're all facing with. How do we share something that's honest and truthful in this way? And I myself, and I'm sure you guys as well, have a certain difficulty with the relationships there of not only being creative and sharing something that's truthful, but also then sharing it in different media platforms and forms, let's say.
I mean, going a bit like again towards the artist, and then for me, like actually the permission to share, it's a very important topic, and it's something that I've been you struggle as an artist. And I guess that now in social media, because the amount of people, because I think that there is something about the amount of people doing the same thing, the question is, it's always, why do I share? Why? That's the question that I've been struggling the most as an artist, no? And especially like coming from like no reference in the family, and then the questioning in the society. Can you work as an artist? Why you? Why not somebody else? You know, so it's like this is a ghost question. It's like it follows me, and I try to answer it over and over again and again, just to give myself the permission to be creative and to share.
I think also that I mean, again, even this transition between, me, I'm still old enough to feel that I see the virtual world as not exactly the real world. Nowadays some people or other generations, they argue it. They feel that already their representation in the virtual world, this is them, you know. We're having this podcast now, but for example, one of the reasons that we can have an intimate and flowing conversation is because we had a real life conversation, 2 months ago, for me personally. And I think that, again, the lesson from art to know is that, it was very common deviation when I was in my first kind of like really good work as a performer. The first one that I was proud of is, it was a company in Israel that was called in Bal Pinto, an Avshalom Polak dance company. And I was there as an apprentice for a year, and then I got I was a second cast. Then I remember that I finally had kind of like a meaningful role in a performance after being there for a year and a half. And I was starting to run with this role, and I was performing for a month and a half. And then one performance, we finished the performance. And Avshalom, the director, that I really appreciate him. I think he's a dramaturgical master. He came and how was the performance? So. And I was like, but we had standing ovation at the end. And he was like, the audience doesn't really matter. And I was like, but I was feeling good. So how did you feel? Doesn't really matter, And I was like, so what matters? He was like, we'll talk tomorrow in rehearsal, And I remember that, I couldn't make sense out of it. And 3 months later, I did the same role, and he came in one performance, and I don't know, I was tired or something. He finished, he's like, good job, Tom. And there was a certain click, I understood what worked, and I cannot put it into words. Okay, that's also, again, it's performance, it's dance, it's movement, but there was something that all of a sudden I understood that is not exactly about how much the audience likes or how much I managed to finish the performance and feel good. There's a certain different type of abstract connection that everything all clicked.
There is the thing.
There's the thing.
There is the artwork, there is the pedagogy proposition, and this thing also has its own life, its own demands, and then you got to listen to it.
Now, if I take this and I make it a metaphor, for example, for social media, you can have a lot of external success by uploading something, but sometimes this external success can be because you were naked or because it was a funny video of your cat, and maybe it wasn't your intention, so there is a certain synchronicity between things that still being a little bit of old man's soul that I am. I think that is based on knowledge, this lesson that I learned from Avshalom, that he was like, okay, I'm looking at a certain craft, the craft of connecting you, the audience, the work of art, and how all of them arranges himself in relation to each other. And he had experience and skill and knowledge to have confidence in saying, okay, today it worked. Today didn't work. Today there's a few things that we need to work on. I think that this thing can also be applied to any type of sharing, again, to social media. Again, we are very common with the stage, but to a gallery, to speaking in front of the family in a family dinner, But I think that the shift of perspective here to get confidence in sharing is to understand that a sharing that is connected is based on knowledge, experience, and intention, and not based on an external feedback, if that makes sense.
Very much so. Slight sidestep. So we have the thing in metaphorical speech marks, and then we'll have the spark, let's say. And I think something or the inspiration. And relating to creativity, there's this certain undescribable something that germinates into a creation, or at least towards a creative process. Where do you guys get your inspiration from? The spark?
Everywhere. like really everywhere, mainly live. It's like, mainly live.
I mean, we are also we are again, it's not even that it's such a juicy detail, but we're a couple in life and also a couple that work together. So we are really big on dialogue, you know, and dialogue is always interesting because it's always puts you in a little bit of an off balance, which for us, off balance is inspiration. You know, once you're off balanced, you have to move. You know, what it's not about like you telling yourself, I have to move. It's like, so I have an idea and I bounce it with Rosé, and it's never, you know, it's never received fully with open arms. There's like, yeah, but you know, and there starts to be a very interesting dance. How I still follow my idea, but now it's like it's bound to the laws of dialogue. And I think dialogue can be, in our case, it's two people. It can be a dialogue with nature. It can be dialogue with a goal. You know, like so for me, dialogue is a very, very inspiring thing.
Oh, and I think just to add that when I mean life, I mean, of course, the experiences that you cannot control that happen, and you just need to accept and see how you can cope or coexist with it. And then there is all the rest of the things that you can choose. I mean, we live in a world like extremely loaded with information. So I also try to curate what comes to my eyes and to my senses, because I know that this is stored somewhere. And this is this store somewhere that I don't see, that it's in the back of my mind. It's this spark that you say. That's when it comes from, you know, and it makes visible. So I try to curate also what to not see.
Are there any rules or intentions you have between you when you do try and communicate an idea or something that's a bit inspiring to you? How do you work with the other person's own buts, let's say?
Well, there is one rule that is important, because, you know, we can start in the studio and then go into the kitchen, you know, and like then finish. So there's one important rule. If one of us has had enough for this day, the other one cannot, you know, it's like, if I'm okay, for me today, enough with work, enough with creativity, then, you know, the other one has to respect. That's an important rule. You can always disengage if you feel. Doesn't happen that often with us, but
I think with words, one of the strategies that I use is convincing. Then I try to work really hard to find arguments that doesn't seem subjective. So I need to work really hard making associations that will convince Tom, which thinks very differently, and to try what I'm thinking. And in the studio, because it's movement, I would say I would actually try to experience both options or both propositions, and then see, because it's a very different way to choose, like the experience or the understanding, what works.
Speaking of spark, and something I'm interested in is, do you both feel like you've always been artists? If we go back to kind of childhood and studies, have you always had this drive to create, or is it something that's grown over time?
In my case, it grew. I had I come from gymnastics, so it's like rhythmics, no? It's called, what's the name?
Rhythmic gymnastics.
Rhythmic gymnastics. So there's not a lot of creativity in there. And then I was going to be a journalist. There is creativity there. Yeah. But no, I didn't see myself as an artist from the beginning. It's more something that I encountered through encountering dance, actually, like through encountering the craft.
It's funny that you say, because like when you said the spark before an inspiration, and I was like, okay, I have to, cannot know an inspiration. I can also talk for another hour, but I'll choose the top priority dialogue now. But the second thing is what you say is like upbringing. I think upbringing is an interesting spark. Um, in my case, absolutely yes. I wouldn't tell you this, but if I look back, it's like all the clues were there, starting from videos of me with like, again, I can say it here, but like clothes of my mom on top of my head, dressed and with makeup that for me was like a samurai, staging my brothers in the living room for avant-garde performance beats. These videos are real. One day I will have the confidence to share them as well. But it's no, but like I mean, I remember myself as a kid in karate, Kyokushinkai, and I was like, okay with fighting, but I was looking forward to the. We had this activity in holidays that we were choosing a partner and staging a fake fight for the parents. And like, okay, we had kata and we had sparring, but this was for me. I was like, the whole year I was waiting for the opportunity to stage, so
I think I must say that if we really look back.
I know you need to defend the.
No, I think that everybody would be an artist.
There's a famous Picasso quote. It's a bit, it's a bit of a cliche, but he says, everybody's born an artist, and the biggest difficulty is to stay one, which it's true. There is a.
Yes, I also have the dressing and the showings, and I'm sure, Will, that you also had it.
100%, yeah. I'm at home right now. It's the day before Christmas, and I have all of these images around me of me as a child.
But again, it's the permission, I think this is what's, in our stories again, and the difference in our stories is that in my family, because there was a lot of creativity in the family, I had a lot of permission. It was like, okay, and I invested in paint. My parents put me in painting. I was a good painter, and then I got tired of it, and they allowed me to go to music. And then, when there was a lot of this playfulness about like, you can pursue your creative aspirations, and I think, and I can say, and we come from different upbringings in that sense. So both of us had the same spark, but we had very different permissions, which, by the way, the result is here we are, the both of us.
I mean, like my parents, it's a different vision. They wanted me to fulfill my talents. So my talent was, I had good ears, so let's put her in music. I have good movement, let's put her in dance, without even wanting. For them was like really like a surprise when I came up with the idea of like, I want to be a dancer.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah.
But maybe this is something interesting. I think that what you like, because the whole premise of my parents was like, you can do whatever you like as long as you commit to it, and then you can change after you manage to commit to it. And I think doing what you like rather than doing what you're good at, but again, I like the idea of being able to commit to what you like. That is not that easy.
I think it's so difficult, especially in, I think I'm more towards Rose's culture and then what I've experienced and the background and the upbringing. It was always biased towards the word talent, and this almost unearned thing of, you didn't earn this necessarily, but you're quite good at it, so you should continue this, rather than, hey, what do you really feel like doing, and what are you drawn towards, and you're kind of not talented at that right now, but hey, do it anyway, and then see what happens. My interest, or my thought goes towards longevity and sustainability within something. Do you guys feel that a push towards interest is more sustainable, even if the initial talent isn't there?
Absolutely. In my opinion, yes. I mean, the problem solving around things that again, there is things that need to mature around it. Rosé said before, to be able, to defend non-subjectively, like to really be able to think, okay, I like these things, I need to solve the problems, how to continue doing it. But at certain point, it's not only because I like it. The liking is the spark, but this spark has great mileage ahead of it if you can take care of the other things that are a little bit more cold. But if the spark is cold, and again, I think in that sense, like, for example, again, I would say talent is a little bit cold because, like you said, there's a choice that you're not sure why you're making when you're liking something. I think also, for example, money, that is a very important thing in our society, but as a core, the longevity of it will probably run into problems sooner or later. So I think that liking does, in the grand scheme of things, and again, it's a generalization. It's not something that I would put on a T-shirt or wave the flag, but it could potentially have more longevity than other reasons to pursue something.
Yeah, I think like it makes. It's not that it makes more sense. I think like when you speak about longevity, you speak about a lot of years. So, and even in things that you have a genuine interest and that you like, there is moments that you really like want to stop and move on and do something else. And, because of, I don't know, like you stay long enough and you will have a wave that it goes down, it's for many reasons. But I think that if you move by interest, this interest transforms constantly. It changes and it evolves, it expands, it shrinks, it's dynamic. Interest is dynamic. Talent, once you exploit your talent, I feel that there is a certain roof in talent. Yeah.
So, speaking of talent and interest, we'll move to pedagogy more specifically. And in particular, I'd like to ask, first of all, can you teach creativity?
Yes. I mean, as pretentious as it is, I think this is what we do, or at least this is what we try to do. Creativity, mostly in movement, that's kind of like what we focus on. But I think, again, taking something that was, I said before, creating the right space, creating the right permissions, and creating the right challenges. I think this, it's not a 100% formula, but it will increase likelihood of people learning about their own creativity. Right space, right permissions, right challenges. And again, the issue is, I think that sometimes the people very easily, because of our society and even what we described, even the three of us, that the upbringing that gave this or didn't give it, but the majority of people, first of all, will respond really well to the space and the permission. But then as soon as you start to bring in the challenges, people will start to question if they really want to work. And this is where creativity becomes more tricky. We have now a situation, for example, that we need to present a company in kind of like 20 minutes. We need to make a discourse that is like kind of a verbal presentation. It's something that we never did. At the beginning, we're like, this is not us. This is not us. It's not, we're our art, we can write about it maybe, but you need to see it. And then we understood that it's a creative challenge because we're teaching this creative challenge to people. Another thing, we take people sometimes into space and we say, you have 10 minutes to get up from the floor and go back down into the floor, and you forget about the other people in the room and you forget about the music in the background. But you just really want to find kind of an authentic expression within this getting out of the floor, coming back down to the floor, And it's amazing what people that commit to the task what they find when they say later after we finish the exercise. And there's 1,001 reasons why not to do the exercise or want to critique the exercise, because it's like, it's so simple and it's like, it makes no sense supposedly. And it's like, yeah, but the music is there and it influences me and the other people in the room and it influences me and it's too slow and my knees hurt and so on and so on. But then you commit to it and you're like, okay, actually there is here a certain something I can learn about my movement, So again, space, permission, challenges. This for me would be a kind of like and again, you can tell me if you disagree, but our proposition to teach creativity.
I think it's the perfect time to add the next word.
Okay.
Please give me one or two.
No, two. It was absorption. It's 103.
Okay. 103.
3.
Very good. I think it's actually a very good word for this topic. The word is sketch.
Sketch.
Please continue on the topic of your pedagogy with the word sketch.
It's me. I mean, first of all, I think like to and it might be obvious, but to teach creativity, you need a container. No, in our container is movement. With sketch.
Well,
Bing. I also
but also say today we're working today in the studio and Rosette today, like in this project, she's the director. I'm inside and she's outside directing. So she was talking a lot today in the studio. So I'm
he's talking more.
I'm saying it to the listeners so they don't think, I'm like starting to
I will speak also. I have something that's quite strong in my mind and maybe it'll spark something.
Okay.
So throughout the couple of years when we had the C word going around the world and we had some lockdowns and bits and bobs going on, I partook in an online class you guys hosted.
Mm.
And one of the ideas you presented was clean paper.
Mm.
And it really struck me in the moment, and I kind of created my own, let's say, idea from that. And the idea was directly called what I was calling sketching. And what I was feeling was that I needed to have a space between isolated parts of my practice and very open, improvised moments. And something that kind of connected the dots. And most importantly, let's say a permission to not be perfect, a permission to not quite know what it's going to turn out as. And it doesn't need to be something that has to be shared anywhere, something that isn't performative. It's just a sketch. And this really inspired me from the class. Can you explain a bit about the idea of blank paper, because I think it's a bit different and maybe this sparks something towards sketching?
Yeah, I think also important to say about sketching before the clean paper, pedagogically, what we are a lot focusing on is like, we think that the pedagogical space is the space for something that is not the final result. So for example, like, it was very common, it's very common in our, we both studied contemporary dance, and contemporary dance for dancers and choreographers to teach choreography in their classes. We don't do this, it's weird for us to teach choreography. Why would a person want to dance my choreography without being in the process of making it, which that's something else that we do. Another thing is that, for example, in martial arts, there's a lot of like, there's kind of like sparring and soft sparring, like flow sparring. That is also something that we're more trying to go for this rather than like, okay, now full on all of your resources, like a playful test ground. For me, this is what sketching talks about. Clean paper in that sense is the flow sparring of improvisation. You kind of like, in improvisation, you take certain elements and you kind of like, you create with them quickly, instantly. In clean paper, we said like, okay, what if we take out actually the urge to use whatever is around you when you improvise? We take out the urge of making something concrete. We just focus on, I am in front of something empty and I'm asking what's now, what's inspiring for me in this emptiness, and I stay with it. And what's my clean paper movement today, now? What, without, putting aside me as a dancer, or me as a mover, or me as a trainer, putting aside my side split project, putting aside my, whatever it is, macaco cartwheel, I don't know what, Tai Chi. Me as a human being, now I have emptiness. What's the first thing that catches my attention? And then, okay, let me try to move this first thing for a while and see what happens.
For me, like actually, now that I was thinking a little bit more about it, I think sketch it actually connects to creativity, and I think also to pedagogy. For me, sketch is a skeleton. It's a structure. It's like, what's underneath, that is like just the essential things that need to be there for things to happen. Like in a workshop, it can be the structure, like what's the exercises that needs to be there that allow the experience. And then all the middle, also, it's creativity, it's like you can flow, you can go in and out, you can color it, you can expand the volume, go down, but I think that sketch is like, what's like the bare minimum, the essential things that need to be there for the thing to be.
And if you think about it, what you do by sketching, which you also do in clean paper, and we give the guidelines for this in the workshop, but when you sketch, you take out a very, very dramatic question that you asked before. Is it something that I want to share? And I think that the more you sketch, the more you understand actually what you want to share. And it helps your creativity. But if for any sketch, every time that you come to improvise movement, or every time you come with a clean paper, like not clean paper, a movement exercise, but like a real paper, and you ask, okay, now I need to draw or write something to be shared, you will not, again, from my experience, you will limit your possibilities and you'll not develop much. You will not have the risk-taking that is necessary to really try new things. But in sketching, which is like clean paper, the exercise that we do in our workshop, it's a bit more open. There's still discipline, but part of the discipline is actually to understand that it doesn't go anywhere, that it stays a sketch.
Speaking of discipline, something that comes to mind, recently we had a discussion about let's say your past life in capoeira, and particularly, let's call it sparring and playing in capoeira. I thought it was really interesting to hear a bit about those experiences, in particular the aliveness of that one-on-one type play. Can you maybe explain a bit about that and how that influences your current practice and teaching?
I think that also to nuance into something that we both share, because I did a lot of capoeira as a kid, but Rosa didn't. But I think that what we both invested a lot in is partnering, to move with another person. In capoeira, for example, one of the things that they say, you don't spar, you play. Again, it depends on the teacher, of course, but me, I'm coming from a school that you play capoeira. I did sparring in judo, I did sparring in boxing, I did sparring in jiu-jitsu. In capoeira, I didn't spar, I played. And you basically, throughout the whole time, you learn how to open up more possibilities of communication. Because that's play at the end of the day, when it's like, I started as a kid, but then somewhere teenage years, I remember I had this insight. It's like, I'm not going to get, there's nothing here that I can get good at in normal terms. I cannot become capoeira world champion. It's ridiculous. It doesn't. Who cares? And I cannot become the best player also because you always need other people. So you nuance and you sharpen and you self-learn about your ability to communicate with movement. And I think when this also, and the funny thing is that when this became a bit more clear, this is when I started to breaking out of capoeira, because I was like, okay, there's too many rules here about communication. I want to communicate in other forms. But I think that beginning in a place that there is a core about that is about communicating and not only introspective, have a very big influence later on. Nowadays, a lot of our work is also based in partnering. That I think that for me that's the where it all began. This affair with partnering in capoeira. But maybe I think also interesting to hear from you about partnering.
Well, I mean, I studied journalism, and a lot of people told me, what's the connection in between journalism and dance or movement? And for me, it's communication. In journalism, it's with words, and in our case, it's partnering. So for me, dance and movement was always connected to communication. It's something that I was drawn since I'm like a child, and I don't know why, but from this choice, I can see that communication it's a very important topic in my being, and now it connects to dance also in the form of partnering, and it connects to the dialogue between performing and doing and saying also, because it's a dialogue. So, or in teaching, it's a dialogue. It's always a dialogue.
It is. Something in my past is design, and one thing that's very clear from the process was these two actions, let's say, within this creative process. The first one would be expansion, so really opening the question up. And the next one would be this contraction and trying to narrow things down. And in university, we had this kind of double wave, let's say, where we had this opening up, this constraining, and then this reopening up, and then this final constraining. I really liked this process because it allowed different things to happen at different times in a way of the energy you bring at the moment. And I think this relates to the communication as well. Sometimes you want to communicate and really open things up and shake things up, and maybe play comes in here. And other times you want to constrain and narrow things down and really define and refine. For you guys, how does your process work with these two forces, and what do you try and do at certain points regarding expanding and constraining or contracting?
I mean, I think in our case, it comes quite simultaneously, because even in the practice, it looks like time for the self, time for communicating. So I think that it comes it's quite simultaneously, and then I think what you are describing, it's a cycle. It's a natural cycle. So also acknowledging these natural cycles in our practice is also what we do. So there will be times where it's more like how did you call it, contracting, and other times that it will be more like expanding. Yeah.
I think also that, again, if we, looking at this process, I totally agree with José's cycle, and it's a very natural cycle. And again, it's a natural cycle that is becoming more and more to listen to with the modern noise, for example, of the virtual world, the work life balance, and a lot of things that are like, really. For example, like, the idea that now everything needs to be there needs to be a single, to extract a product. So it's like I remember a friend told me a few years ago, it's like, because you said play, and I agree, play is something expansive. Then he said, but play is everything. You can solve everything by play. And I was like, well, if a loved one died, from my experience, in my life, and I don't want playfulness, but I want to breathe. I want to close in. I want to, I want to be depressed in a way. It's something that is important for my being to be able to, to minimize the play. To die with this person, even to say in more provocative language, but I think that everybody that lost someone can feel this, something dies with you and you don't want to play, And then later, like life, seasons pass, and the grief, slowly becomes something that it's integral with you, and you're ready again to open up again to the sun, and to blooming and to play again, and so on. And the permission to listen to this cycle, and to be authentic about it, is something that is not necessarily comes hand in hand with demands of society, and also not with the principles of modern culture. So I agree, and I think that you're very in that sense, probably you're fortunate to have had this representation already in school. And to bring it into practice, I think it's something that me personally, I'm still learning how to do, or still attempting to understand when is the time to expand and when is the time to close down.
I feel like it challenged the idea of growing. No, it's like this. We connect expanding with growing, or like growing with expanding. Sorry, we connect growing with expanding, but growing sometimes is like contracting.
I'm going to try and ask the question. We have the final random word, but you have a one of one guess. So I'll just tell you the word is guess. Funnily enough, guess. And I think I'd like to ask a question based upon this word that's related to the topic. When you're sharing or teaching specifically, how much do you try to make the attendees guess and be in that state of trying to figure things out for themselves? And how much do you try and take the guesswork away and really solidify and define and give this overly simplified step-by-step process? Do you have a certain leaning towards one or the other? Do you work with everything?
Look, guess to make somebody guess, especially in pedagogical context, is to put somebody with confronting a certain unknown. Okay. Now, humans psychologically, too much exposure of the unknown can be very harmful. So I think that for me personally, when I teach, I want them to guess as much as possible, because I think it's a challenge that with the right space and with the right permission, they can develop creatively without creating harm. So again, I need to be really sensitive. When is it too much? There is all this, I think ultimate learning experience can be, you throw a person in a room, you leave them with, I don't know, with just one song, or with just like, a piece of paper and a pencil, or endless piece of paper, and you see, you lock the door and return after a month, and you have a genius work, but at the same time, it can cause a trauma, for example, like, again, I'm speaking metaphorically now. So I think that there is this balance here that I think that on a learning, the more you guess, the more quickly you learn. It's guessing is good for you. It's like, it's like is making you work. It's making you be alive. You need to understand what's going on, and to understand what's going on, this is learning, to come up with answers, come up with strategies, come up with techniques. But there is a responsibility in holding pedagogical spaces that I think it overwhelms even the efficiency of learning, at least for me personally. And this is that people need to come out of the workshop or the class safe and happy, like healthier in a way, ideally healthier than they came in, So if for the sake of learning, I'm making them confront too much unknown, I don't think I did a good job as a teacher. So once again, as much as possible, as long as it's not harmful.
Mm-hmm. I think also like that it's important that people comes out of the workshop with something, at least something that they came from, not just for the experience or even for the health of it, but they came to learn something. Of course, like guessing, it's part of learning through experiencing and not telling. Not the teacher telling what it is. So I think that this is a very important aspect. But I think that as a teacher, you need to also understand, okay, what do I need to, what are the sketches, the elements that need to be there on the table to actually like suggest, like inspired, to make the creative moment of like association through the experience to happen for the student.
And for example, suggesting instead of preaching is a very good way of making people have a right amount of guessing.
In that sense, I also like very much like, aesthetically something that comes more from the East and Japan, that they, for example, in terms of design, they don't do symmetry. They create a little bit of a symmetry. So, there is something empty that it's been suggested, and then it allows the person that is witnessing, attending the workshop to fill up this gap.
It's very metaphorical, but in a workshop, it's not that metaphorical because you actually move all the time. So, I mean,
for sure, you enact it. Speaking of leaving healthier, I'm aware that the time is very much up. But I would love to, rather than just have a harsh cut, I would love to round up slowly and I always try and do something at the end, like a quick fire question, so we keep the answers short. I'm reading back the questions that I wrote for you guys, and I was obviously a bit devilish when I wrote them. So let's see how we go. Some of them will be straightforward. Some of them will be harder, I guess. Try and keep the answers concise. Okay. First one, easy for Tom, especially, because I know he's obsessed with books. What is your favorite book that inspires you creatively?
For me, the two I have to. Can I do two? It's okay, two or one? I have to choose.
You can choose two. Why not?
Right. So, The Beginner's Mind by Shunryo Suzuki, and Zen and the Art of Archery by Eugen Herigel.
Me? I need
hiding
to
in the corner.
Yes.
I don't want to choose.
No.
I didn't do two for the both of us. I just did two because I'm greedy.
Okay, let's do this. Raser, who is your favorite artist or designer, and why?
It's a very hard thing. Like, now I have Basquiat in my mind, but because Tom has a T-shirt.
Just to explain why it's a very creative answer.
Very good.
But I know you explain why, actually.
It's a podcast. We don't need to know.
It's short.
Perfect.
Picasso.
Either of you, which is your favorite country to teach in, and why?
It's a very difficult question.
I warned you.
It's a very difficult question. I really love so many countries to teach in. Like, really, it's overwhelming. Like, I cannot, obviously I see you, I remember good times from the UK. We spoke about inspirations. I remember good times from teaching in Japan, but then I'm like, not so long ago we were in California and New York and Seattle, and it was great, but also Germany and Austria. I don't know, I feel that the workshop, maybe because we make our own space, it feels like, it overwhelms actually the place, and we just have a good time everywhere.
Well, you're gonna get something better from me.
Would you rather teach an elderly population or a very young population under the age of 16?
At this point, me elderly.
Me too.
But it changes, but now elderly.
You're teaching alone. Would you rather teach 50 or more people or 5 or less people?
5 or
5.
less.
Would you rather teach with your voice but without your eyes, or with no voice but you can see?
No voice.
Wait, with no voice but your eyes?
Blind or deaf.
Mute.
Mute, sorry. Blind or mute?
Mute.
Wow. So you'd rather write the ideas or simply show them?
That's what we're professionals in showing.
Show. Show.
Show all the way.
Show.
Very good. Final question. Do you have a favorite metaphor?
Each one can say the one of the other person, because we know each other so well, but let's not do this because
Please, if you want.
What's my metaphor?
No, you say take for you, I take for you.
No.
Favorite metaphor.
Who was Michelangelo? I like that he carving his art, kind of like art understanding as like something that you carve, and I don't know.
So carving is art.
Yes.
Carving is the process of art. I like water. I like water metaphors.
It's true.
Very nice. Guys, thank you so much for joining this evening. It's very late and I appreciate it very much. I think nothing more needs to be said. I'd love to hear from you guys so the audience knows where we can find your work and what upcoming workshops and or performances they can maybe find you at.
I think we can also keep it short because we have like kind of a schedule, and to start to run the schedule, I think that, internet, wondergroundcompany.com. That's our performance arts website. And movementarchery.com is our pedagogical body of work with the workshops, with also the online courses that we began making. And I think these two, and in both of them, there's our contacts. So also, if anybody wants to reach us out,
there we are.
Especially on the topic of creativity.
Perfect.
Guys, thank you so much.
Thank
you, Will. It's a pleasure.
Yes.
And thanks a lot for having us. It was, it's nice. I feel this conversation was also helping to generate another small spark. So I feel very much rewarded for this opportunity.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on yet another conversation. We're up to series 3, which is amazing. Thank you so much for listening, for engaging, and for supporting if you're a beloved patroon. If you're new here, I'd love to just give you a small insight into the inspiration behind the podcast. It's based upon a favorite metaphor of mine, and it goes something like this. There were 5 blind folk walking through a jungle. They come across an impassable object. The first one goes to the object, reaches, feels the leg and goes, it's a big strong tree. The next one comes to the object, feels the side and says, no, it feels more like a wall. The next one comes up, feels what he thinks is a large snake. The next one comes and says, no, I think it's more like a spear. After all 5 perspectives are taken in, they realize that actually the impassable object is an elephant. And to me, this is synonymous with allowing various perspectives to enliven or enlighten one specific topic. The idea, therefore, is we engage with 5 different people every series. We interview them on the same topic and we gain 5 unique insights into this topic. If you enjoyed this series, we also have some previous series. Series 1 was all around the idea of movement. Series 2 was all around the idea of injury. And we also have now what we call side notes, a short form version of our conversations that we share between the gaps in our series. As always, it really helps us if you like and share this with your friends and family. We're a self-funded project and we're slowly growing step by step. We'd love to continue these interesting conversations with these amazing individuals for you guys to listen to. So please share. Thank you so much from Will and Harvey. Keep figuring things out.